Today I'm going to show you how to make the 10 basic strokes of calligraphy. So the 10 basic strokes are what make up the letters in your lowercase alphabet. By learning these strokes, you'll not only be able to create the lowercase alphabet, but because you'll have the building blocks, you'll be able to create your own style of calligraphy. And that is very, very important. So let's get started. The first basic stroke is called the thin hairline. To create the thin hairline, you're going to use the lightest amount of pressure possible and sweep up. The next basic stroke is called the thick downstroke. Now for the thick downstroke, you are going to apply as much pressure as you can, so as much of the brush is touching the page as possible, and you are going to pull down. Now you want to make sure you get a nice square bottom on these. So to do that, you want to pause before you lift your pen up. If you pull it up right away, you're going to get something like that. So you want to make sure you keep the pressure nice and consistent. Pause a little bit before you lift the pen off the page. The next basic stroke is a combination of these two, and it's called the horseshoe. So for the horseshoe, you're going to start out with a thin hairline. You're going to gradually add pressure, pull it down, and square it at the bottom. So again, thin hairline, gradually add, pull down, square it at the bottom. Now, the gradual add of pressure is really important. That's what gives you this nice curve on top. If you add your pressure too quickly, you're going to get a point. And that's not what we want for this shape. We want a nice curve. So that might mean in the beginning that you have to slow it down a little bit. That's okay. Slow it down. Do whatever you need to do to get that nice rounded curve. Now, another thing you might notice as you're doing this, that maybe your shapes are a little wider than mine. They might look something like this. That's okay. When we're beginning, it's a lot easier to create the shapes a little wider. But just remember that each of these shapes is going to go into an individual letter. So they're going to be pretty small. So you want to try to keep them as narrow as possible. The next basic stroke is called the U shape. Now the U shape is just the exact opposite of our horseshoe here. For the U shape, you are going to start with a thick downstroke. You are going to gradually release pressure and sweep up. Thick downstroke, gradually release pressure, sweep up. Again, you want that gradual release so that you get that nice rounded bottom. Now, even though the two of these basic strokes look really similar, you might find that the U shape is a lot more difficult for you than the horseshoe. And there's a good reason for that. It's a lot easier to add pressure than it is to let go of it. So don't get frustrated if this particular stroke takes you a little bit of time to master. The next basic stroke is the V shape. Now the V shape is one of the most commonly used basic strokes in our lowercase alphabet. So for the V shape, it's a combination of the horseshoe and the U shape. You're going to start with a thin hairline, gradually add, gradually release, and sweep up. Again, we want nice rounded curves on top and bottom. Thin hairline, gradually add, gradually release. Again, with these, you might find that as you're doing them, your shapes look a lot wider. They may look something like this. That's okay. Again, you just want to remember that these are going to be parts of letters, so we want to try to keep them as narrow as possible. Now, this is my favorite basic stroke. It's like a little roller coaster, so I hope you enjoy it too. The next one is the S shape. Now the S shape is not to be confused with the letter S. So whereas the letter S is going to be like a really dramatic curve like this, the S shape is going to be much, much more subtle. You're going to start with a thin hairline, you're going to gradually add pressure, and then you're going to gradually release it. So you can see it's just a very subtle curve here. Again, start with a thin hairline, gradually add, gradually release. Now, because you're starting and ending with hairlines, the thickest part of this stroke should be in the center. The next basic stroke is the O shape. Not gonna lie to you, the O shape is a little tricky and it's not super intuitive. So it's good to practice this one on a regular basis in your calligraphy practice. So for the O shape, you're actually going to start on the right side of the shape. You're not going to start at the top of the O. You're going to start a little bit to the right. So for the O shape, you're going to start a little bit to the right with a thin hairline. You're going to gradually add pressure. You're going to gradually release it, and you're going to sweep up and meet the hairline. This takes practice. Do not get frustrated if in the beginning you are not able to meet that hairline. You have to remember that I do this all day, every day, and even I mess it up sometimes. So don't get frustrated. Just keep on practicing, and eventually you will get there to where you meet the hairline. Now the good news is that letters that use the O shape are way easier to make than the actual O shape itself. So once you've mastered this one, the rest of the alphabet is going to be a piece of cake for you. The next basic stroke is our upward loop. Now, if the upward loop looks like an L to you, it's because it basically is. For the upward loop, you're going to start with a thin hairline, sweep up, gradually add pressure, and then gradually release it. So you do want to gradually release it at the end so you get this nice little hairline tail. So, comparing that to our downstroke where we just keep it square at the bottom. For the upward loop shape, you really want to get that nice little curve. Again, light amount of pressure, gradually add, gradually release. Next is the downward loop. And if the upward loop looks like an L, then the downward loop looks a lot like a J. So for the downward loop, you're going to start around the midline. So you're going to start with a thick downstroke, you're going to gradually release it and sweep up. Thick downstroke, gradually release, sweep up. Now, one thing you want to make sure of is that you keep that pressure nice and consistent on your way down so that you get a nice little curve right here. So you can see here, I let go of my pressure just a little too early and it squared it off. Like I said, I do this all day, every day, and even I make mistakes like this. So don't get discouraged. Keep on practicing. Keep that pressure nice and consistent the whole way down. There we go. That's much better. That's the downward loop. Now the last little element that we're going to do is the dot or the loop and whisker. So the dot and whisker, let me show you first what it looks like, and then I will show you how it's used and then how we'll break it down to make it. So this is what it looks like, and you might be thinking, when am I going to use this in my letters? And you are going to use it in a couple different ways. First of all, the letter R. There's an example of the dot and the whisker. Here's an example of the loop and the whisker. You're also going to use it when you're connecting letters. So we have another video on connecting your letters and creating joins. You're going to use this dot and whisker or loop and whisker shape when you're doing your horizontal joins. So that's how you're going to use this particular shape. So to create it, To create the dot and whisker, you're just going to apply pressure, pull down, sweep out while releasing the pressure. Now this is a pretty quick motion. Looks almost like a little backwards comma. For the loop and whisker, you're going to sweep up with a thin hairline, gradually add, gradually release that pressure while you sweep out. Now remember, these are parts of letters, so these are going to be much, much smaller when you're actually working, but it's good to practice them larger so that when you come into your actual letters, you will have an idea of what's going on. So we're going to do a quick recap of everything that we just learned with the 10 basic strokes. First, we have our thin hairline, which you're going to make using the lightest amount of pressure possible. Now, if you notice that you're getting a really shaky hairline on the way up, do not fret. This is really common. The way that you can correct that is remember that you are pushing it up. You're pushing it up. You don't want to use that wrist. You really want to use that elbow and shoulder to push it up. That's going to help you get a steadier, less shaky line. Next is the thick downstroke. You're going to apply pressure, keep it consistent the whole way through. Make sure the bottom is nice and squared. Then we have our horseshoe, which is a combination, thin hairline, gradually add, pull down, squaring up the bottom. Next is our U-shape. U-shape is just the inverse of our horseshoe. We're going to start with a thick downstroke, gradually release pressure and sweep up. Now again, you might find this one a little bit more tricky. You got that long hairline on the way up. That's okay, just keep on practicing. Next we have our V-shape, which is a little roller coaster. You're going to sweep up with a thin hairline, gradually add, gradually release, sweep up. Then we have our S shape. Remember, this is not the letter S, but a very subtle curve. Then our dreaded O shape. You're going to start on the right side of the form, letter form. Start with a thin hairline, gradually add pressure, gradually release it, sweep up, and meet the hairline. Next, we have our upward loop, which looks a whole lot like an L. You're going to sweep up, thin upstroke, gradually add, gradually release. Then we have our downward loop. Thick downstroke, gradually release that pressure, sweep it up, taking care to keep the pressure consistent as you pull down. And finally, we have our dot and whisker and our loop and whisker. And those are your 10 basic strokes. Like I said, these will help you as you're as you're learning your lowercase alphabet, and it will also, more importantly, help you in the creation of your own style of calligraphy. So be sure to practice these so that you can create your own masterpiece.